Okay, Darla, did you hit the go live button?
Yes,
It
ma'am.
looks like she did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to double check. So, welcome. I'm Ellen Jimerson,
And I'm Johnny Skinner,
and this is Moving Parts.
the podcast where we investigate why children become trans. And today we have an incredible guest. Beth Bourne is the chair for Moms for Liberty in Yolo County, California, and a powerful advocate for children not being medicalized and for the rights of their parents, and a fearsome opponent of those who ignore the rights of children and parents. But before we add her to the stage, we want to update you on what's been happening in the gender landscape lately.
And I forgot to mention that we have Darla with us in the control booth.
Yes, our precious Darla. We love you so much.
Yeah, we love Darla. Okay, so it's okay. Okie dokie. In gender news, this is just from this week. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected another parental notification case. The U.S. Supreme Court has so far denied hearing formal arguments for cases that would have settled whether or how schools can support students' gender transitions. The justice's latest refusal to hear a case on the issue comes as more states are taking a stance, and even as some on the bench are pushing for the High Court to formally weigh in. This one was filed by California's Rockland Unified School District. The district filed a petition in April after the state's Public Employment Relations Board decided in 2025 that Rockland Unified's policy requiring parental notification of students' gender transitions violated state law. The district policy had required teachers to notify students' parents within 3 days of their transgender or nonconforming status. Second, new details of the Texas Children's Hospital court-ordered detransition clinic were announced. According to the Justice Department, the Houston-based hospital has agreed to pay more than $10 million in civil penalties and damages for allegedly falsely billing Medicaid and other insurance for these, quote, pediatric sex rejecting procedures, end quote. The federal government alleges the hospital violated the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the False Claims Act, and federal fraud and conspiracy laws. All services at the new clinic will be funded by Texas Children's, the largest children's hospital system in the country, and will be provided free of charge for the first 5 years. Previously, all that was known about the settlement was that the hospital agreed to pay $10 million to the state and permanently revoke the medical privileges of 3 current doctors and 2 former ones. Third, the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, based in Cleveland, Ohio, followed suit in reaching an agreement with the Department of Justice to provide detransition care, not to perform sex-rejecting procedures on minors, and to pay a monetary penalty. 4, Texas A&M has asked dozens of minors, including gender studies. The programs removed include graduate certificates in public history, women's and gender studies, and teaching history, alongside undergraduate minors such as African American studies, Latin American and U.S. Latino studies, philosophy and communication studies. 5, Santa Fe, New Mexico, reported surgeries and pharmaceuticals are protected in New Mexico, but can be hard to access. Despite legal protections in New Mexico for gender-affirming care, many transgender residents say treatment can be difficult to come by in the state, especially with the federal administration cuts. Due to changes in insurance coverage and a shortage of providers, some people have turned to do-it-yourself treatments through an online gray market or even out-of-state travel to access surgery. 6. In Arizona, U.S. Representative Abe Hamadeh and Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Horn endorsed the Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Kids Act. It's now in the U.S. Senate and is a ban on teaching gender ideology in public schools. 7. The Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee held a hearing on pediatric gender medicine. The hearing was predictable and largely unremarkable, except for a very curious and potentially important omission, i.e., any reference from anyone to WPATH. Among those who testified was Chloe Cole. 8. From 2016 to 2023, over 1 in 250 natal girls were taking testosterone by age 17 in Oregon, according to Benjamin Ryan in his Substack article today. 9, and finally, a district court has ruled that Trump cannot move transgender women to men's prisons. The judge's order keeps 14 incarcerated women in their current placements after the court found evidence of serious safety risks. Okay, and now we go to what we're really here for, which is to talk with Beth Bourne. And I can tell you that in a past life, Beth was a research assistant at the University of California, Davis, focusing on farmland preservation. Her position ended in June 2025. Beth is a fearsome opponent, as Johnny said. She pretended to be non-binary to see if she could get enrolled in Kaiser Permanente's gender reassignment program, in which her daughter had become enmeshed, and found it surprisingly easy to do. Then she recently stripped to a bikini at a California school board meeting to press the issue of non-segregated locker rooms. And she testified on the harms of medical interventions on children before the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. She is chair of Moms for Liberty, Yolo County, California. Okay, I've lost my place. And she's been threatened so many times, including this delightful exchange that happened at the Democratic Convention in San Francisco when an employee at the University of California, San Francisco, said that she was going to track her down and fucking kill her. Now, if that were not bad enough, 2 days ago, she was literally assaulted in a public space and nobody did anything. And I'm not a lawyer, but in my estimation, when someone throws garbage at you and that garbage hits you, that is not just assault, that is battery. At any rate, Beth, we welcome you very, very gladly. We are excited to meet you. We appreciate you. We are here to listen. And you have the floor if you want it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I could just briefly talk about how I got into this or sure.
Yeah,
So,
tell us
Yeah.
how you got involved in this space. I know that you're a parent yourself that
Right.
kind of like brought you into this. So just like tell us your story and like where it began and we'll just take it from there.
Sounds great. And I got to hear you talk, Johnny, at in Albuquerque at the Gen Spec conference. And I think it was maybe my third one that I've been to. And you know, every year it gets better. And your talk this year was just so incredible. So thank you for being so public. So you know what it's like to be public, right?
Yes, believe me. And I also understand what it's like to get threats and harassment as well. You know, it's an
As do
unfortunate,
I. Yeah.
it's an unfortunate part of this space. And you know, you handle it so bravely and brazenly. So
And
that's
you
why
just
I
keep
decided to
going.
be here today.
Keep going.
Yeah, I think so. Either you recoil and you just say, I can't do this. You know, it's not good for my mental health, or you know, I can't function, or you just get tougher and stronger, and you know, you just keep going. And so I understand people that don't want to be very public because they have made it very hard for us. But so my story started in 2018 when my daughter, along with many of her classmates here in Davis, California, which is a blue city in a blue state. We have the big university here, UC Davis, and a lot of state employees live in Davis because we're so close to Sacramento, and our town's about 85% Democratic. So it was very easy to have this kind of this gender ideology or woke ideology kind of come into our community and sort of take over. And so you know, the public schools here were really promoting this idea, and I didn't realize it because you know, my daughter was the first kind of cohort that grew up, you know, learning about it in school and having classmates. But she and you know, maybe half of her theater group, a third of her choir group sort of came out as transgender around the same time in junior high school. And these girls were all very similar, you know, very gifted, intellectually very mature, but maybe socially immature, very creative, very sensitive, sympathetic type girls. Mostly it was girls in her group. And then, you know, once she got further into high school, I started to see a lot more boys coming from a different way. But in her group, yeah, it was these girls that were in the honors classes for the most part. And it became, you know, a special interest or a shared interest among their group of friends. And when she came out as a trans boy, you know, she'd also suffered some, or a good friend suffered some trauma, sexual assault trauma. So, you know, that I think that impacts you when you're a young girl going through puberty, and then you're given this invitation or this enticing idea that you don't even have to become a woman, you can become a man instead, and that probably feels safer. And you know, it's a lot easier in some ways because you know, I myself tend to want to be a tomboy. You know, there's a little bit less pressure sometimes, and so she started dressing like a boy and cut her hair. And then soon after, she started wearing a breast binder. But it was really Kaiser Permanente suggesting to her at the first appointment where they heard she was using this new name, and her father, my ex-husband, was using these pronouns, you know, he, him, that they offered her the chance to go to the Kaiser Permanente Gender Pride Clinic in Oakland. And this is the same clinic that Chloe Cole and Layla Jane, you know, they both had top surgery, I think at 13 and 15 years old. So it's real close to Davis, and they send all the kids there from Davis. And, you know, the pediatrician, this is the first day she heard my daughter use a new name. And we were just there for like a wellness visit. You know, she was feeling dizzy. But she said, you should go to this gender clinic. You know, it's a one-stop shop where you can meet with an endocrinologist and an OBGYN and a gender specialist. And, you know, they can really help you. You know, I'm positive you said a one-stop shop and these other things, but it was like, and they can help you, you know, become your authentic self, or, you know, support you in this journey. And I pushed back, and I did really ask. Well, I called this doctor the next day, and I said, you know, why did you suggest that to my daughter? We were there for something else. You know, why even suggest that it's okay to have her name changed in her medical records? I mean, she didn't ask me first. But, I called the endocrinologist and I heard from him. He said it's an emerging field, that they're going by WPATH standards and the endocrinologists or endocrine society. And I was like, wait a second, because he said there's no long-term studies. I'm like, my daughter would be the guinea pig, right? Like she would be the first group of girls going on puberty blockers and testosterone. And so I pushed back, and I was lucky. I'm thankful my ex-husband and my daughter's psychiatrist agreed to nothing medical until she turned 18. And then she basically pretty much desisted from her trans identity, meaning she hadn't done anything medical. She started to realize that she enjoyed, long hair and makeup and dress. I mean, not that you need to do that to be a woman, but that, she just enjoyed the things that make it fun to be feminine. And I think, we've been estranged for 3 years, so I can't say for certain, what she's doing at this moment, but I believe she's doing really well in school and, has a healthy whole body. And so I just speak out so much because I've seen so many girls, her classmates growing up and boys, right here in our neighborhood who enjoyed ballet. They did a performance every year at the talent show. And everyone thought this young man would grow up to be a gay man. And then he came out as a trans girl. And there, multiple boys like that. And then the girls who were same-sex attracted in junior high school all came out as trans men. And so I have to speak out. I mean, it's hurting autistic kids, gay kids, kids that have been traumatized, kids that are just, they're maybe they're just lonely and they're looking for a fun group of kids. And they are like, in general, some of the funnest kids I've seen is in the LGBTQ kind of rainbow community here in Davis.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to protect them.
Well, I hope she's doing well too, and I hope she finds her way back into your life, and knowing that everything you said and did was because you love her. Mm-hmm. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your getting into the Kaiser Permanente plan. That I was reading a piece on you and that, and I was just floored.
Isn't it crazy?
Floored that. So you decided that you were going to use the same talking points that your daughter uses, mm-hmm. and then on top of that, to make sure that you were getting what you would actually get, were all the things you were saying absolutely true, you kept throwing out these red flags. Your mm-hmm. story would change. Your mm-hmm. history would change. Your wants and your desires would change. And none of that?
No.
So you talk about that because you'll do it better than I will.
Yeah, so I realized, I was trying everything to get my liberal mom friends to understand that this is all insane. And, I wanted my daughter to understand, but, it's hard to convince a 14 or 15-year-old who has these wonderful friends who are, are trans boys. But I thought if I could convince the moms around me, I mean, these are women I've known for 15, 20 years. They've watched my daughter grow up. They saw she was just a girly girl, gymnastics, Girl Scouts. If they could understand how crazy this is, that maybe, I could make a difference in my daughter's life or my ex-husband's life or her teachers and her school counselors. Everybody could wake up if I do all this work.
Yeah.
And so, I started, I'm like, it's not that hard. I mean, these people are highly educated and, they're nice people. They'll understand when I explain it to them, right?
Right.
You're like, come on, critical thinking. Like, these are the same people that were fighting for, no GMO in our food, or they wanted organic, or they didn't want, pesticide spraying, or, I'm trying to all these different
for same-sex marriage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all these issues. But so I started off with, I think, the girls' sports issue, maybe. Like, I held a couple events, brought in some big speakers. Actually, Riley Gaines came here to UC Davis. But the women weren't waking up to that. They were like, oh, it's just a few trans women and it's just sports. And, and then I would bring up the issue of prisons and men and women's prisons. Oh, that's not that big of a deal. It's just a few, women get raped by prison guards as well. And then then I started showing them what was being taught in the schools, like the health curriculum. It was so insane, like these books. My daughter's AP biology book. They got new textbooks that basically said that there's this different kind of sex besides male and female. But nothing I could do would convince them. So I thought, well, look, what I'll do is I will go to my Kaiser doctor and I will get approved for top surgery. I'll get on testosterone and I'll, ask for a phalloplasty, and I'll show them just how easy it is to get all this medical treatment. And then once they see that I did it, then they'll understand that it's all fake and fraud. But that really wasn't the case. So, I think it's a great story. I think it was almost 8 or 9 months going through the appointments. But, I found out that I could get testosterone here at Kaiser Permanente from my, my family doctor in one appointment. It was an 8-minute appointment. This was the only one I had to actually do in person. It was an 8-minute appointment. And then she gave me my prescription. I told her, is there anything you can give me besides testosterone? Because I really want to have facial hair, but I'm worried about, the risk of liver cancer. And is there any other drugs that could give me that, I was telling her I want like a mustache and a goatee. It's like, I'm dressed like this. And she's like, well, we can do this for you. And she actually said, when I said, how do you decide how much testosterone? Because she was talking about microdosing or more. And she said, it's really the Wild West out here. That's the word she used. It's really the Wild West. I was like, okay. But you're going to give me this drug. It's off label, right? FDA hasn't approved testosterone for women. It even says it, and I don't have my pump here, but it was $5 copay. I stopped by at the pharmacy on my way out, picked up my testosterone pump, and it says, not to be used by women. And then when I had to do the blood test, and they gave me back my report to show what my testosterone level was. And they used a scale that's for men. So it showed my testosterone was like super low because, for a man, it's super low. Well, if you look on the women's chart, my testosterone is actually super high for a 55-year-old woman. And so, but they don't show you that. They show my testosterone level on a men's chart. So then they can say, oh, you're just super low. So it's all fraud, right? And so then but I got approved for the top surgery in 2 appointments. And I was, the first appointment is a mental health assessment. And that's why I mentioned all the red flags, mental health, illness in my family. I had eating disorder in college, which is true. Those are both true. And then I was also sexually assaulted growing up several times in Mexico City because I'm on the metro or the public bus. And that's just how young girls get treated, right? You get groped, grabbed. And so I said, could any of those things be the reason I want to become this non-binary person? Oh, no, don't worry about that. That eating disorders in the past or, that mental health, that's, we don't need to worry about that. And, and so then, so when I met with a surgeon, so this is like 3 weeks later, I meet with a surgeon. I stood right here in my kitchen, dining room, and she just had me lift up my shirt and, without a bra on. And she just wanted to look at my breast. And she's, asking me what kind of incision I want and what I want to do with my nipple grafts. But it's all over Zoom. It's like a, 15-minute appointment. And you don't have to ever go in person for top surgery. It's all done over Zoom. It's 2 appointments. And the surgeon's just looking mostly, I think, for your body. And she's like, oh, you're a perfect candidate, and she's like, what look are you going for? Something more masculine or more, what'd she say, like gender neutral? And yeah. And then they show you some.
Wow.
And then they also have you join in on a call with all the other people that are interested in top surgery, and they bring in 3 people that have recently had top surgery to talk about, how wonderful their experience is. So it's really like a sales pitch, right? They're bringing in these past patients, young women who they look like they're really struggling mentally, but they're like, oh, I'm so happy I had, such a great care team. And, afterwards, I just was so excited to look in the mirror and, I feel like I'm my real self now. And, the call had like 50 women on it. And some of these, some of them that were mothers with their daughters. So young teen girls on this call with the surgeon. The surgeon was Winnie Tong. He's actually a woman surgeon down in Southern California. Okay. But there's a couple surgeons in Kaiser who are actually men pretending to be women. And so I sometimes get it mixed up, but, so then I did go for the big, I went for the phalloplasty, and that was, again, just 2 appointments over Zoom. And I asked if they could make an exception instead of, waiting the typical 1 year on testosterone. I said, I just decided I don't want to be on the testosterone, and I want to have my top surgery and my phalloplasty done at the same time. So I just miss less work, and they agreed to it. They said, okay, we will make an exception. We talked to our team. So they approved my phalloplasty after it was like 4 or 5 months of me first telling my OBGYN that I think I'm non-binary. And and you don't even want to hear about how the nightmares I got thinking about a phalloplasty, because I had to, describe what kind I wanted. And then,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I think I might understand more than you might know. Cause as you're explaining this really reflects the process that I went through, even as an adult, changing doctors. They're always like, oh, so what traits do you want to develop? Oh, we could always try to customize to what you want. When they were testing my hormone levels, they would compare me to a prepubescent girl, a pediatric female. And it's oh my God. So that's why, just for all of our viewers, if you see my reactions, it's because this is really what's going on at the ground level. And I know so many people try to dismiss it and go, oh, that's just anti-trans. It's no, this is really what's happening out there.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. I think it's, you basically come in and you give the doctor your diagnosis of what, what you are, and then you give them what treatment you want. So it's all decided by the patient. And they just say, we believe in body autonomy, and we believe that, we should give you whatever you want. And we don't want to be gatekeepers. They would say that to me. We don't want to be gatekeepers. And I'm like, that's what doctors are supposed to be.
You're supposed to be a gatekeeper.
Exactly.
Which is especially what they tell adults, because I remember when I came of age, in the trans identity still, and that's exactly what my new providers, and I will say they did help me out in some ways, but that is how they treated it. They're like, we don't want to be gatekeepers of your care. Whatever you want, we'll do. Yeah. And it's no, I'm looking for guidance,
exactly.
As distressed patients should be given,
Right.
One of the things that has struck me when they say we're all about bodily autonomy, and then you have your life threatened by someone who's in, and then when you had garbage thrown on you, this just set me off. And then says, you made me. The classic.
Oh yeah, Darvo.
The classic argument of every domestic abuser and ever. It's your fault. I did it because you made me.
Yep.
And maybe real quickly, we got a great crowd in here.
Sure.
And one of the people who has dropped in is Willie Bragg, who is a great favorite of mine. So, hey, Willie, thank you for dropping by. No, back to you, Beth.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, maybe 2 years ago, if somebody had said to me, it's your fault. Your signs are mean, or you're speaking hate. I might have been embarrassed, and I might have been like, oh, maybe what I'm saying is hateful, or maybe I deserve to be treated this way because obviously I'm kind of confrontational, but then I've gained a lot more experience and knowledge about how free speech works and where you can use free speech and what is speech and what's assault, right? So my sign that says, no boys and girls sports, or sometimes I have a sign that says, why are so many girls having double mastectomies? That's not hate speech, or that's not,
No.
I'm not assaulting anyone. I'm just holding up a sign with my view. And I can say what I want with my words as long as I'm not inciting violence. And if I'm in a public setting like I was on my way into the library, and these trans activists were standing in front of the doorway, almost intimidating people coming in. And that's kind of why I pushed back. I'd just gotten there, and I thought, I could just walk in and not make any scene and just go set up my laptop and get ready for this event. But I'm like, no, they're trying to intimidate every woman or every person who walks into this event. So they feel like either they're going to be physically threatened or they're doing something wrong. And they even had the mayor come by. The mayor came by and gave this statement, to this like far left journalist about why he thought it was wrong that we were holding our talk. It was about, I think, the transgender assault on women. Why it was wrong that the speakers were there, and he alluded to the fact we were, connected with the Proud Boys and neo-Nazis. It's like, what evidence do you have for any of that? So instead of arguing that, trying to make an argument about why, our event, the topic was wrong. They didn't even go into the event. They try to smear us and by just calling us names or saying we're associated with something. Yeah. So, but I think people are starting to realize there is no real good argument for why we do these things to children, or why there's men and women's spaces in sports. And so they're just going to keep coming after us, personally attacking us and trying to intimidate us.
Well, it's funny how anybody who is not somebody that you relate to is suddenly a member of the Proud Boys.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I'm waiting for someone to say I'm a member of the Proud Boys.
I mean, I don't want to speak out of place, but this is, really very reminiscent of the Darbo tactics that these people resort to, because they know that there isn't any good argument for this stuff. And I know some of the people that follow me will be disappointed in this, but this is the truth, because, I've experienced this myself. The organization that supports me, GenSpect, is smeared as a conversion therapy organization. We're the furthest thing from it, and at the end of the day, these people, I feel like they know what they're doing, because I've seen, like, when I started following you, Beth, I supported everything that you were doing. And even when I was in the trans identity, there was never any reason to use a woman's space, be in women's sports. That was all completely uncomfortable. That was not the point of doing any of this. I feel like what these people are fighting for, and please, anyone feel free to comment on what I'm saying, feel free to interject, but I feel like what these people are fighting for and how they respond to opposition really tells you their whole intention right there. The intention is to erode women's rights. The intention is to almost like convert, like, as you said, gay kids, non-conforming kids, tomboys, abused kids. They're not trying to look at the finer details as to why people start feeling this distress towards their bodies. Their whole point is to push people to identify with the very thing that supports their whole political movement.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Ellen?
Yeah.
What do I think? I don't know about people's intentions. I do know that there would be some people who, there are clearly people who are benefiting by this. And this is the Kaiser Permanentes, the doctors, the pharmaceuticals. But as far as people like the people I know, I think there are a lot of families who have who have dysfunction of one kind or another going on, and they have kids that are lesbian or gay, and the idea is put into their heads that they're not lesbian, they're not gay, they're trans. And I don't think there's an intention there on the people I know. I don't think they're homophobic, but I think the culture can be, and there can be a sort of, a fear, as you know, Johnny, and all the guests that we've had on this show so far have been lesbian, and a gay boy, you. And then I think Beth is the first one besides me who are just, as far as I know, I don't know Beth well enough to say this, but are straight. But more power to you if you're not.
Right. No. But I'm laughing because I my whole thing of being able to identify as this non-binary person, I always, it's almost like now you can be anything you want to be, right? So,
well, it was so huge.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just to wrap up about people's intentions. One of my great problems with people is not their intentions, but is that they are willfully ignorant. And when somebody like me, who officiated the first same-sex wedding in Alabama and wrote a book called Rainbow in the Word, LGBTQ Christians' Biblical Memoirs, if I say, I think we need to look at this, if I say, we actually need to look at what the Skermetti decision was, my problem is that people won't open up their laptop and read the Skermetti decision, or read the Don't Say Gay, which doesn't exist, bill, or will look at somebody like you who has been so obviously, and why a journalist would say to you anything about your I don't get it. I don't think you can be willfully ignorant like that. Or like the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. Now their intentions, they know what they're doing. Anyway.
Oh yeah. But yes, I mean, and I want to hear your thoughts, Beth, as well, on what you feel like these people's intent, because as I was watching that video of you getting assaulted in the street for having a very reasonable outlook on this stuff. I know that some people will be like, oh, but the approach, but I'm sorry. Somebody has to do it. You know what I mean?
I mean, the thing is even if I said something really that you can never resort to physically being violent towards somebody, no matter what their speech is. You just can't. That's just not how our speech works in America. So, yeah. So I was just going to mention, when I first started speaking out, it was at my son's back to school night. I was in his chemistry class, and there was a big Progress Pride flag. And I was so still just reeling from what had happened to my daughter that I asked, I said, it was back to school night. I said to the whole classroom and to the teacher, why is this flag in my son's chemistry class? There's no reason for this political flag in this classroom. Well, they escorted me out of the classroom. There are already, 3 administrators who were my private escorts because they didn't trust me. They took me out of the front of the school, and then they served me with a restraining order. And I was just saying, I don't want this flag in the classroom. And, they were upset that I'd also been putting things on Lives of TikTok on social media. And I was just sharing exactly what's in the curriculum, or exactly, what the flags look like in the school, or the painting of the crosswalks, all the trans stuff. And I was sharing it. And every time I would share it, there'd be bomb threats. So there were all these bomb threats at the school. And Southern Poverty Law Center put me on their hate watch list. So this is in 2023.
You personally?
Oh yeah, me personally. Oh yeah, Beth Bourne, Moms for Liberty is, she is an extremist, right wing, Christian nationalist, all these things. And here I was, a super liberal woman, right? I was like so far from all of these things that they were describing me. I'd only voted for Democrats up until 2021. And so, but they needed to discredit me completely in this town. So anytime I would say anything, they'd be like, well, she's on the SPLC's hate watch list, right?
Oh, slam dunk right there.
Yeah, exactly. And the FBI, the Homeland Security, and the Davis Police, of course, never could track the bomb threats to me, and now that Southern Poverty Law Center has been, they're finding that they were giving money to these white supremacist groups, right, to try to create this division and racism. I wouldn't be surprised if they were also responsible for these false flags, these bomb threats, because they had to try to silence me. Right?
Yeah.
And my friend, she was a school board member. She's kind of spoke out, and she asked me to help her with her statement on a pride resolution. And she just spoke about the social contagion of girls coming out as trans. Well, they spent, I don't know what it was, like $40,000 to have her recalled from her school board position. And is it Aaron Reed, the person who, he does that, he's a trans identified man. I think it's Aaron in the Morning. He does this
Aaron in the Morning.
Yeah, he was talking about how this is an example for everyone in the nation to follow, for any school board member who ever speaks, any kind of transphobic statement. This is how you get rid of them. So I feel like, the two of us were trying to kind of wake people up, and what they do is they just come after you. Yeah. So there was a petition right about that time with 1,100 signatures in Davis of people saying that Davis is for everyone, and Beth Bourne is only speaking, hate. So, they basically had people. I don't know what is a word. It's like when you sign something that says you're going to follow along with a pledge of allegiance to this group of everyone supporting trans. Yeah, Aaron in the Morning. Thank you for putting that in there, Darla. So yeah, all my neighbors put up pride flags in their front yard. Not all of them, but there's definitely this a feeling of canceling me for speaking out. But that's okay. Once you're canceled, you only can be canceled once. And so I had more time. I wasn't getting invited to anything, and
parties you didn't want to go to anyway.
Exactly.
But it hurts. It does. It hurts. And I do want to clarify something. I'm not sure why I decided to bring up my book. It does say LGBTQ Christians, and my thinking on trans has changed since.
I was curious about that.
Yeah. I stand by the book, and I stand by what people had to say about it. But my thinking as to, trans, I just thought it was another type of gay or lesbian.
Right.
I think a lot of people think, and I hadn't thought about it. So I changed my opinion. Mm-hmm. And y'all can change yours too.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's when people started saying children can consent.
Right.
And they know who they are.
Yes.
And I'm like, and I've told this story before, my grandson when he was about 5 or 4, meowed to everything you asked. Meow, 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 meow. And I'm like, I don't think he really thought he was a cat. I think he was just kind of trying that out. He was curious about why cats meow, and people say words. But children don't know that they cannot. I mean, that just subverts the entire idea of both childhood and the meaning of consent. That is just so that's what I think that's what sent me on my sort of deep dive into this. But yeah, speaking about people's motivations, when somebody comes up to you and throws garbage on you, well, that's not just somebody who is dealing with problems in their family and all of that.
Yeah. So, wait, Johnny, have you been canceled at all? Like, you're probably not working or like.
Well, I am working, although I have had some difficulty as I've had activists, kind of figure out places that I've worked and have showed up. So I am, I split my time between my advocacy and then my work, and I do some remote work now to try to avoid that, because that really is just an element in this space, when you start speaking out, even as someone who is a survivor who, and you've seen me speak, I am just the gentlest spirit in the world. And even still, I've had threats. I've had people show up to my work and want to know like my schedule and like, well, when will Johnny be here? What I mean? And it can be very, very scary. That's, like in the past, I would have been like, well, I would like a more gentle approach because it's such a delicate subject. But, when people are coming at you and really trying to intimidate you to silence, it's really difficult to try to stay in that very gentle and neutral approach. So that's where, I also like the approach that you take, because someone's got to do it, and it just calls these people out right on the point. Like, what do you mean you want men and women's sports? Like, that's crazy. Like, you know what I mean? So as I'm listening along, it's just an incredible scandal we've all found ourselves in. And that's where I'm just so thankful for parents like yourself that have really taken a stand against this, because not everyone has the inner strength to be able to do that. And I'm wondering, do you have a good support system around you to like, do you have security when you go to these events?
People were worried about me at Redwood City, but they could see that there were about 15 supporters of mine, like 20 feet away. I didn't tell them what I was going to do because I wasn't planning on doing it. I just, I'm like a moth to a flame. I just like, I'm going to go over there now when I see these trans activists. The more mask people have on their face, the more interested I am in talking to them. So there were people over there. And I actually didn't get, when I spoken at UC Davis or held my signs, that what we get, Charlie Kirk has come to speak and Riley Gaines, we get this Antifa that's really violent, and they dress a certain way, and they carry themselves a certain way. And I didn't get that sense from this Redwood City crowd. But, I'm sure lots of people are probably right that I maybe took a little too much of a chance there. But, then the police showed up, 5 police cars. So maybe there were like 6 or 7 police officers showed up a few minutes later, and then they escorted me into the event. And then later they escorted me to my car and made sure I got out of there safely. So they did a great job.
We do have a question for you, Beth. But before I read off the question, I want to welcome my good friend Warren, who has a podcast that everyone needs to listen to, Extra Bulla. And it's Warren who talked me through setting up StreamYard. So he's a good friend to me and to us. So my The question comes from another very dear friend of mine, and he asked, does Beth believe that trans people exist at all? Does she believe that any children could know they are transgender? How can you support a child helpfully and non-medically?
So let's see. So I believe, just from my experience and watching my daughter fall into this, and all of these girls that are similar to her, that there is no transgender people. They learned about, in her classroom, they learned about Bruce Jenner becoming Caitlyn Jenner. And we know Bruce Jenner has said on national TV he got aroused wearing his daughter's underwear. And we know that Bruce Jenner was in a terrible car crash where he killed a woman. And then he came out soon after as Caitlyn Jenner. So I definitely think there's lots of adults who want to have a new identity, either because they get aroused by the idea of becoming a woman, or a lot of women who have been sexually assaulted who find becoming, a trans man, and it's very easy for a woman to, in some ways, to pass, because testosterone is so powerful. And when you see a woman with facial hair, even if her hands are real small and her hips are real wide, your mind says, oh, that must be a man. So they don't really pass, but like that first appearance. So yeah, there's people that have wanted to either cross dress or, call themselves, what I think the other word was transsexual we used to use. So of course those people exist, but this idea that we have gender identities or gender souls, or that any of this gender affirming care is in any way doing anything good for humans, is a terrible idea. So, I would say, if we ever wanted to allow this, I know I'm working with the Federal Trade Commission on my medical records. So I know they see this all as consumer fraud and medical malpractice. So maybe there'll be some place where in the world, you go have all these procedures done, but everybody knows it's plastic surgery, and everybody knows it's just like a tattoo or body piercing. It's just a way to, it's like self-harm. If you want to self-harm and get tattoos, or you're into cutting, or you're into body piercing, okay, this is another form of that, right? Having a double mastectomy is just extreme cutting and self-harm. So we won't have it in hospitals or in, places that medical care is being given, because it's not medical care. So, but yeah, for a child, I would really discourage any parents allowing their child to socially transition in any way, because it's really dangerous. Once a child thinks that they can, take on, and I'm not saying that, like, I would encourage, if your son likes wearing nail polish because he likes wearing nail polish, show him lots of men that enjoy looking feminine, and that, so I grew up during the time of David Bowie and Boy George and Prince. And so, we'd see these like super hot men dressing in very feminine ways. And it was like fun. And we'd have the kids in drama would dress that way, but nobody was thinking that Prince was a woman because he liked high heels. And I don't remember how he used to wear his hair, but that idea that you don't have to have these stereotypes of what, I don't own a dress. I mean, maybe I have 2 dresses in my closet that I've bought in 30 years. I don't own skirts. I like to wear shorts and pants, but it's
I always enjoy seeing what nail polish Johnny has on.
Yes, exactly.
Today. And I keep hoping we can get a sponsorship, maybe from L'Oreal or
hey, maybe we'll see in the future.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I would agree with that, Beth, because, growing up for me, especially coming out of the trans identity, because of course I grew up in the age like way after David Bowie. I was born in 2002. Um, but when I was, coming into adulthood and really starting to question what was done to me as a child, because for me, it was like I was an effeminate child and I was told I needed to do this to be normal. Imagine what that does to a kid. And then all you do is look at your physical features and your doctors are pointing out what you need changed. So then you're hyper focusing on this. And like you say, it really is, it's very reminiscent of the realm of plastic surgery because, I've unfortunately had consultations with plastic surgeons going through all of this, and it's exactly the same. They're pointing out different features that you need to get corrected. Imagine going through that as someone with any kind of severe body issues. So really it's almost like this is an inversion of healthcare, and that's coming from somebody that went through it, that was this like trans kid, and being able to grow up and see people like old clips of David Bowie being like, these aren't girl shoes, they're shoes, silly. And things like that really opened my mind up to, oh, wait, you don't have to abide by these stereotypes to be accepted as a man or a woman.
Right.
I mean,
And then for Johnny, I want to say to my friend who posed these questions, Johnny was told by a gay therapist that he was so effeminate.
well, gay endocrinologist.
An endocrinologist, that he was so effeminate that he would never fit into any gay society. Mm-hmm. And so back to how can you support a child healthily and non-medically, I want to encourage everyone to think and to maybe be in some way be able to bring up to their kids that maybe they're just good old-fashioned gay boy or good old plain vanilla lesbian girl, and to wait it out and don't just, I think Beth said this, I think people are beginning to realize that it's not a good idea to encourage them to socially transition or do those kinds of things. But just, maybe to, I don't know, talk more about what it means to be gay or lesbian, before it gets to be an issue. I don't know. I'm past that.
Or even just gender nonconforming, because
gender nonconforming.
I'm pretty sure that Prince and David Bowie were both, and I might be incorrect, but I know that David Bowie was bisexual, and I'm pretty sure that Prince dated women. So like, even if you're just like gender nonconforming, fashion is fashion. If you have an interest,
right,
embrace it. Like, let's bring back androgyny. You don't have to be gay to be androgynous. And that's really, where I'm just shocked at how this whole movement that pushes for this kind of medicalization, they use black and white thinking and, quite frankly, Darvo tactics when people
Tell me what Darvo is. You've said that twice now, and I said it. I saw it with one of Beth's defenders.
Darvo is deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It's the classic tactics that abusers use, where they'll deny the abuse and then they'll attack the character of the victim, and then they'll
the man with the garbage.
Yes, that was actually, and I think I posted this under your post, Beth. This is that was a perfect
I think I saw that
of Darvo, where he denied that the harm happened, then he attacked Beth's character, and then he reversed victim and offender by saying that she was in fact attacking them somehow with her words, and somehow he was trying to use that to justify the physical assault on her. So that's a perfect example of how abusers narcissistic abusers will use Darvo to try to justify their abuse. So that's what Darvo is, for anyone that doesn't know.
Yeah, I didn't, but yeah, I
If
know
anyone
it's
follows my Twitter, you'll see I use that acronym all the time. Like this.
deny, accuse,
Deny,
attack.
yep,
What?
deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender.
Yeah, deny, attack. Yeah. Well, I do think a lot of that is going on. Another thing that I think is happening, and I've mentioned this, I may have mentioned it to Beth when we were talking, but I think another thing that happened is that with Obergefell v. Hodges, and the recognition of same-sex marriage throughout marriage throughout the states, the reason for being of some of the organizations so for that, the reason for being went away with the funding.
Right.
And so something else had to come along to replace it. I also think that another thing that has happened is that a trap was set for people who think of themselves as being left of center or liberal, or that a trap was set to discredit them, and they walked right in. I don't know. What do you think about that, Beth?
Yes, yeah, definitely the whole, all these organizations that were formed behind the idea of making sure we can get same-sex marriage, the HRC, these very powerful organizations. And then when same-sex marriage passed so easily, then they had all this capital or this infrastructure in place, and they needed a new civil rights issue to take on. And so they took on the trans people. And then they brought in children as a way to say there must really be these trans adults because we have to have trans children. And then, the medical establishment. But sorry, I was going back to the idea, I think, that the question about how do you help a child who feels like they're transgender? So, and we're going to have this huge number of kids who are going to think they're transgender because now it's been in the schools, going back 10 years now. And, it's in the library books and in the, a lot of the shows on Netflix or, it's just a part of all this YouTube culture. So what I would do to kind of help your child be safe from it is let them know that, yes, you're going to hear a lot about these transgender people, but you have to know and, have this conversation really young with your child that we have science and we have two sexes. Or you could do it from a religious perspective, but you could just as easily do it, completely agnostic. Is just say that, you're either male or female, and then really explain to your child how wonderful it is to be a female because you can make babies, and how wonderful it is to be male because you're the stronger sex that can, provide and gather and hunt and, do all these things. And, so you're really playing up how different we are. And, we have all these other qualities that make us, that match our sex. I wish I had talked to my daughter about the fact that I had amniocentesis done when she was, in my womb. So I knew she was XX chromosome. So I knew she was going to be a girl. So, just that reminder all the time of that we have these two sexes. And then there's so many ways you can keep reminding kids, get them involved in Future Farmers of America or 4-H, get them into, I don't know, raising chickens and hens and bees and, all these animal life where you can just see there's male and female, right? It's part of our life. And then the other thing is maybe let kids know from a young age that we have these times in history, either with the Boy Scouts or with the Roman Catholic Church, where we've had these terrible situations where adults come in and they prey on young kids, and they're put in a place of authority. So everyone thinks, oh, it's a priest. Oh, it's a Boy Scout leader. They must be safe, and I'm going to let my child alone with them. Because right now they're learning in public school that it's the teacher and the school counselor and your, principal or your coach, that these are the trusted adults, and that maybe your parents aren't safe. If they don't affirm your transgender identity, then find another adult. And you should let your child know from a very young age that we've been lying to children forever. And you can bring up, how it's happened in churches or how it's happened in other organizations and how it's happening in our schools now, just so they and let them know, never, ever, ever let an adult tell you that you can keep a secret with them. You can't keep secrets with anybody. I've even heard dads say, or moms say, even your father can't ask you to keep a secret, or make it clear that we don't keep secrets in our family with anybody, with a grandparent or an uncle. And then I think the last thing I would say is talk to your child about some of the medical scandals that have happened in the past. I mean, maybe an older child, but, remind them that at one time we were told cigarettes were really healthy, or that mothers shouldn't breastfeed their child because formula is so healthy, or you could talk about the opioid crisis or lobotomies, but, let them know that we don't have to trust big pharma and we don't have to trust medicine. We just don't, and so hopefully all these ideas will come into their mind. So when they're in their classroom and the teacher says, I'm going to ask you to tell me in private, what is your, are you transgender? Because teachers do that, right? They ask the kids to say on the, first day of school, tell me if you have a different name and pronouns, and if your parents know, or, if you don't want them to know. So your child will come home and say, Mom, you won't believe what I learned at school today. Or Dad, they asked me if I was transgender, and they asked if I wanted to keep it a secret. And so your child will be able to recognize these things, how dangerous they are. So that's what I was thinking. So I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. My friend says, and of course I knew this because I know him very well. He says, I am gay. The lack of support made me horribly depressed. Do you acknowledge the risk of that for someone who says they are transgender?
So it sounds like you, as a gay person, you didn't have a lot of support or like a community, or you weren't getting validation from people close to you. That's a part of, it's just a human experience, whether I think it's being gay or anything. And we all want that. So, what can you do? People are like, well, you have to have the gender sexuality alliance clubs because you have to have a place where the gay kids can find community. Well, that's not really true, because you could have all kinds of activities. Like you could have, a group that does theater and musicals, or you have a group that does, there's just activities, and I don't want to stereotype activities that gay people do. Like, oh, if you have a softball team that's open to all the girls, then girls that are lesbians are going to have a place to be. I just think you can find community in lots of different ways, so that kids don't feel lonely. Just trying to think. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable having sexuality be a part of like what the common interest is and why the teacher is going to be talking to the kids about this, because I feel like it's kind of a private part of people's lives, no matter what your sexuality is. So, we have a drag club here at our school in Davis, and there's boys dancing in drag on the campus quad. And to me, it looks like they're being kind of sexualized or groomed for the adults. And I wouldn't like that if there were girls dancing that way, you know, on the quad at lunch with teachers encouraging it. So yeah, maybe Johnny, you probably have better advice. Like,
Well, and I will say, you
one
you
of the things that my friend Grant has in common with Johnny too is that they came out of. I mean, I actually talked more with Johnny than with Grant about this, but they had that very conservative religious background, and also Grant, like me, is in Alabama, which is so there is a lot of lack of support for gay and lesbians, and that's one of the issues that I'm trying to address, is that there's a lack of support for gay and lesbian kids. It comes from the church, it comes from their families, it comes from a lot of different places, but that is not the same thing as a child thinking they're transgender.
yes.
There's something else going on here. The risk that for someone, I think if you ask yourself, is a girl who gets a mastectomy at 13 more or less likely to be horribly, horribly depressed when she's 23, as Johnny is, and wants to have a baby and breastfeed and those kinds of things, or have, you know, a sexual relationship involving the breasts and the nipples? Or a guy like Johnny is going to be more or less depressed or down or disturbed because estrogen has so mutilated his body that there's no going back.
Mhm.
I think that's a better way to frame it. You know, I mean, people were struggling for a long time being closeted when they were gay and lesbian, and that has been a big issue with the people we've interviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to respond to that if I may as well, because
Yeah.
you know, growing up gay, like I totally understand like the shame and the lack of support growing up. But there is a fundamental difference between like being gay, which tends to center around like physical bodily responses and like things that are very that don't things that don't require any kind of societal conditioning versus as opposed to like feeling a sense of discontent with your body, because ultimately that's what gender dysphoria boils down to. It's sort of like this umbrella term for all of these different feelings of discontent with your body. And in the sense of like earlier with the question about like kids in this regard, you know, I grew up as a trans kid. I went through my whole adolescence like that. And as a kid, you don't have the life experience yet to be able to understand yourself and what you might want in the future. Like, because that is a question that they ask you in the gender therapist's office is like, well, do you want to be an old woman or an old man? How do you see yourself in 60 years? And at 13, I couldn't even envision myself at 20, much less at, you know, 60 years down the line. Because you just don't have that lived experience yet. And I would like, you know, our listeners, especially those, you know, who are gay themselves, like imagine, you know, you went through your childhood, because homophobia really hasn't died even in the West, you know, because I come from Michigan, which is, you know, objectively like a very liberal, a very blue state. And I still grew up with extensive homophobia. And you know, it's still very alive in the States. And imagine going through that upbringing and having all that shame around who you are, and then somebody comes along a doctor or a therapist who's in your community or not in your community, but they have your flag in their office and they say, oh, we see you're distressed. It's because your body is wrong. Your whole body is wrong, but it's okay because we're going to make it better for you. And making it better for you involves changing your entire body before you've even had the chance to try to live and accept yourself as a gay person first. And that's really, fundamentally what a lot of this boils down to, because that's really what started, between that and, of course, the erosion of women's rights is what really started this whole trans debate to begin with. That was when people were pushing for these people to be in women's spaces, and when they were pushing for younger and younger ages to medicalize that. So it's really not as simple as just, someone who says that they're transgender, because there's so many different circumstances in life that might draw somebody into arriving at that conclusion. Does that make sense, you guys?
Well, I mean, does Grant want to chime in? Whether that makes sense. And I did want to clarify, you said you lived as trans, and that's because you were put on estrogen when you were 13.
13.
Is that right?
I was 13. In the 7th grade. Yeah.
So, and it has permanent.
And it is permanent. And that is what's happening on the ground level. That's, as harsh as some people think it might be to start bringing up these subjects, that really is what they're doing to kids. That was 2016 when I was medicalized, and it took just a few months. Like, I told my mom in February that I think I might be trans. By May, I had my first appointment with the therapist. I had my first appointment with the endocrinologist in July. I started testosterone blockers, and by August, I was on estrogen. And by January 2017, puberty blockers. It's that fast. And then they were already talking about surgery, like full facial reconstructive surgery to a minor. This really is what's happening out there. And that's just the male experience, even from the experience of like the girls. Like when I was in high school, a lot of my because a lot of my friends were female, a lot of them fell into a trans identity for a while because, they're maturing. And then, men can be very creepy towards girls when they start maturing. And girls,
no lie.
Yeah. And they don't want that attention. So then they fall into this because it's presented as a way of, oh, well, you can avoid all of that. That's really what's so insidious about this medical scandal. And I feel like a lot of the people that are proponents of it, that support this kind of medicalization, they don't really take into account experiences like mine or like my friends, that actually lived through this, as minors. They almost paint it as like, well, you get months and months of therapy, and this is, who you are essentially at your core. But that's not the case for most people. You know what I mean? That's where I find like a lot of the hatred that's thrown at you, Beth, I tend to find a little bit of a disagreement with, because, even though my gentle spirit takes a different approach to this stuff, just because I have a different personality, I still find that what you do is still so necessary, because people just don't seem to grasp just how pervasive and how damaging this medical scandal really has been on the ground level. You know what I mean?
Right. And people will say to me, well, you were like yelling, or you were confrontational. And I'm like, I'm just surprised I didn't burn down the whole school. Like what they do or what they're telling kids, or, the way children have been harmed by what, like I kind of realize, I kind of think those of us that are speaking out, we're doing a really good job of, staying, restrained and not doing anything. I would never do anything violent or but you know what I mean? Like, it's really, it's crazy that these dads know that their daughters are having to change in front of boys at their, junior high school locker room here in Davis. And they're not standing there, outside of the door saying, no, I'm not going to let this happen, because they've been told that, we have to be nice, or we have to just, kind of stay quiet. And I just think people should be more bold. So
Yeah. Well, and I agree with that as a survivor, because even when I was growing up, and I'm going to drop a little bit of nuance that I want like our listeners to think about. When I was growing up and I was trans identified in high school, my school, I always used the nurse's restroom growing up, right? Because I was very visibly gay. So I'd be bullied in the men's restroom. And I also had a little bit of germophobia. So I hated being it's filthy. So I always used the nurse's restroom, and they stopped giving me the key to it. So I would see other students let into it, but I wasn't allowed in there because the school wanted me in the women's locker room. But that made me uncomfortable because anyone who is genuinely suffering from an uncomfortability with their body will not want to go into a space where A, they're going to stand out, and B, if anyone, actually cares about the best for those around them. So like for me, a lot of my friends were female. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I don't want to just make other people uncomfortable going into that space. It would make me uncomfortable. It made them uncomfortable. It didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And nobody in my high school had stood by me in that. So I would have killed, even as a trans identified kid, I would have killed to have had an advocate, quite frankly, like yourself, that would have been there, that would have been brave enough to say, hey, this is crazy. Like, let that kid be. You know what I mean? And ultimately, and of course, my perception is going to be colored by my experience. But, I think about that a lot as I see, a lot of these younger, trans identified kids being pushed this route. I'm like, well, they're being told that they have to do this. And ultimately, I mean, I just think back to when I was in that position, and it would have done me such a good service to have had somebody who was willing to stand up to that, to make these people listen to me and be like, you know what? This is actually crazy. We'll just let this person into the nurse's restroom, ultimately, if we have to have another space, the third space is already available and it's one stall. So like, what is all of the fight about? You know what I mean? So ultimately, that's where I'm
I hate to say this, but I promised Beth that we would only keep her talking for an hour, and we've gone past that. So unless Beth has some last word of wisdom to say, then I'm just going to thank you so much. Do you have a last word of wisdom?
I think I said everything I wanted to get out there just a minute ago. But I love this format, and I love hearing from Johnny. I think this is a great idea. Just get people talking about it from different perspectives. So I'm excited to hear who you guys have on next. This is really great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for what you're doing and for your concern for kids and your bravery and all of that. We would welcome having you back anytime you feel like you might want to make a reappearance.
Okay.
And, as I say, the latchkey will be out for you anytime. So we're going to remove you from the stage. Okay. You are welcome to hang around backstage, and welcome. We're welcome to enter into the chat.
Sounds great.
If you want to. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Beth. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Beth. It was good talking to you.
You too.
Okay. So, oh, she's just
what a brave woman. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, it's she's remarkable. I can't believe people will say, anyway, so this is the part of the show where Johnny and I are going to sort of debrief and, what thoughts have come up to us. Grant did say, to be clear, from my view, I take issue with minors being medically transitioned. I have more to say, but it's chopped. Chat characters are limited. I don't know what that means. But
It
anyway.
means that the characters that he can type, it limits them. So, and it includes spaces in that. So it means he can't put all of his thoughts out there before it limits the amount of text he's able.
Is that what he means by chopped?
Yeah. The characters are chopped. So if he types his full thoughts out, it won't let him post all of that. Essentially.
Yeah. So what do you think, Johnny?
Well, I'm sure you could tell from when we had Beth in the recording room with us. I'm a supporter of Beth's. I know that some people who follow me might be, critical of that, and they're right to have their opinions. Like I said earlier, we all arrive at our own perceptions through our own lived experiences. And for me, since, going through this, quite frankly, medical scandal at a young age, it was not beneficial for me. So I see, when I see Beth out there advocating, all that I see from my perspective is, man, I wish I had someone like that who is able to advocate for me and my mom when I was going through all of this. I know some people might criticize the approach, but sometimes a direct approach is necessary. I understand that some people might have their own reservations on that, and they are, of course, totally welcome to have those opinions. But for me, I would have killed to have somebody that was that direct and that passionate about this issue when I was in school and I was fighting for just fair treatment. Like, I wanted to be able to use the nurse's restroom. I didn't want to be a burden on anyone. I didn't want to be in a space where I stood out. That just always felt inherently strange to me, that people would want to push me in those spaces. And by those spaces, I mean opposite sex spaces. Like, for me, it would have been female changing rooms, female locker rooms. It didn't feel comfortable to me because I was struggling with a body dysphoria. I was uncomfortable with my physical embodiment, and I wouldn't want to be in a situation that would put more emphasis on that. And that's just speaking from my perspective. Of course, there was also the concern of, well, it makes other people uncomfortable too. So why would I do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that to me is why I am a supporter of Beth as she's out here advocating, because she is a staunch advocate for single sex spaces, and that is necessary in today's world, because so many of these kids that are caught up in this are being told that they have to use those spaces and that it is socially acceptable, and like, if they feel weird about it, then they're being made to feel like that's them, or that there's something wrong with them feeling weird about it, because that's how my school tried to make me feel. Well, if you feel strange about it, then that just means you're having weird thoughts. And it's like, no, I don't want to be in that space because it's wrong. But that's just from my perspective. And of course, like I said earlier, my perspective is, colored and shaped by my experiences. But I thought this was a very, very powerful conversation. Like I said, I'm a supporter of Beth. I like what she's doing out there. She has a very strong approach. It's not the approach I would be able to take because I'm such a gentle soul. But like I said, quite frankly, somebody's got to do it. And, she's at least direct in her approach and what she thinks. And if you disagree, then you can disagree and have that conversation with her. And she's open to that conversation.
And I think, like, as with a lot of the people that we've talked to or talked about, she's portrayed, if you Google her name, she's portrayed as being like the stripping for the school board. Well, she took off a sweater, and I guess whatever the shorts or whatever she had on the bottom, she had on a bikini underneath. She did not take it all off at the school board meeting, but that's what the headlines say. And those kinds of things, you get this impression from her that she's just this fire breather, or from what you see of her that she's sort of a fire breather, but you can see from her demeanor and hear that she's a very sweet, very likable, very has a moderate.
Yeah. She's open to conversation.
She's open to conversation, and she's not calling anybody any names, and she's not scary, and she's not dangerous. She just speaks, what we like to say, speaks truth to power.
Yeah, ultimately. And like I said earlier, we need somebody who does that, because and here's the thing, even if you disagree, it's really important that we have these voices out there to bring nuance to the table. Because even though if you're all the way over here on the, spectrum of this conversation, and you support, if you're all the way this way and you support like trans women and women's sports and in women's locker rooms and children transitioning, and you view Beth as all the way on the opposite side, it's important that we at least hear out your opposition to understand where they're coming from, because ultimately that's how we arrive at the truth. It's, as great of people as everyone feels like they are, ultimately, like I said earlier, your perspective is going to be shaped by your experiences, and ultimately the objective truth is always going to be somewhere in between. There's your truth, and then there's the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really important to be able to hear out these voices, even if they bother you, to just understand where they're coming from. And who knows? You might find things that you agree on. You might find some things like, oh, wow, I really didn't think about that before, because I was just thinking about it from my perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where, I love that we're able to have these open-ended conversations with people, because it's so imperative with how controversial and politicized of a topic this has become for us to have these conversations. Because at the end of the day, these are all human rights issues. They should not be made into this like culture war, battle that it's really become. And I don't see a lot of people, there are some people on the opposition. I did an interview lately with someone who is absolutely lovely, who might disagree with a lot of the things that we talked about today. But there isn't a lot of people out there willing to have those conversations on the other side of this issue. So I really appreciate that Beth was willing to come on and talk to us today and go over everything.
Yeah. And, I just feel for her with her daughter, situation with her daughter. That's just, nobody should have to go through that,
And I want to highlight something that was said in our private chat. Darla said if she were a man, she would be received differently. And,
well, yeah,
that is a good point.
I mean,
I just want to say, when men are, I've even noticed this myself, when men are much more outspoken in this way, especially in a much more direct way, people don't find as much of an issue with it. But because Beth is a woman, people will just dismiss her as a TERF, and they won't actually listen to what Beth is trying to say. they just resort to accusations and violence, like we said earlier with the Darvo tactics. It's deny,
And
attack.
the man with the garbage. I mean, does he go up to other men? Does the woman who grabbed the sign out of her hands?
I want to be very careful with what I say, but let me tell you, and this is my opinion, as someone who knows how men are socially with each other, I don't think that these people would go up and act like that to a man, because men are much more, they're bigger and stronger, and
have
trying to be careful with what I say, but you know, the way that those people were treating her in that clip recently where she was assaulted, you know, if they did that to a man, they would have gotten punched.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like 1,000%. Like I feel like Beth handled that situation very, very well for what it became because of those people's behavior ultimately.
And I think I get in trouble with a lot of people because I'm a woman who doesn't ask permission to say what she has to say. And it just gets all over people.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, so yeah, I definitely think that's a part of what, even when, as with Beth, it comes from other women, like the woman at the Democratic convention. I'm going to hunt you down and effing kill you.
Yeah.
I don't think she would have gone up to, a man and gotten in his face. I mean, maybe she would have, but I'm suspicious of that.
Maybe it would take a very brave, very overconfident person to do that. I mean, it takes that in general to be able to make those kinds of threats to people. And ultimately, you know, that's what we face in this world, just speaking out against the scandal. You know, Beth is a parent that has, you know, skin in this game. That's how she got looped into this. I am a survivor, a child survivor of this. And even still, like, threats get hurled my way frequently by various activists in this space. You know, and that goes back to what we were saying earlier. You know, although it's smart, and I would also hesitate to I guess label people's intentions, because ultimately at the end of the day I'm not a mind reader, but when people jump to Darvo tactics and it's deny, attack, and then they reverse victim and offender, and if that doesn't work, then they resort to death threats or threats of harm. You know, to me, that really says all of their intentions right there. You know, there are two ways to read people's intentions. You can read them through their words, of course, if they tell you head on, and also through their actions. And just from observing, you know, like in that video of her being assaulted, just from observing the actions of that old man that was trying to gaslight her and the person that attacked her, you know, I can see with my eyes plain as day that these people do not have good intentions. And if they don't have good intentions, or it's just a random person on the street, who's to say that they have good intentions for the people that they claim to be advocating for? You know, because I'm that person that these kinds of people claim to be advocating for. And when I talk about my experience, you know, in this space and what it's actually like behind closed doors in these doctors' offices as a trans kid, then these kinds of people, these kinds of activists, they don't want to hear my experience. They just call me a liar. They deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's the same game always.
You're making it up or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I just think I think it's so incredible that we have some people out here that are so passionate and so brave to go out there and to be as outspoken as Beth is.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, we need her, and we need people like her, because it's just not right. What's happening to children is just not right. What's happening to their parents is just not right. And then this whole thing of pushing yourself into women's spaces. I mean, it just surprises me that more women who think of themselves as being feminists are not offended by that.
Yeah, that has
How can we work so hard to set aside women's sports and set aside women's changing rooms and even women's restrooms?
Yeah.
Women didn't always have a private restroom to go to.
Well, this is something that has always confused me over the years. And like I said earlier, even when I was trans identified, like in high school, it didn't make any sense to me why people's solution to me being bullied in the male restroom, or even just not liking it, because quite frankly, men's restrooms are not always, but they tend to be filthy, especially if they're public. But my aversion to that, or wanting to avoid bullying, it always confused me why my school, and quite frankly, as it seems society's solution right now, was to put me in women's restrooms or locker rooms. That never made any sense to me. It didn't feel like it was actually solving the problem. It was just taking a problem and making it so much worse by making it more complicated.
Punitive.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard the point thrown out there by, activists saying, well, it'll help, trans girls, for example, because that's my experience, not be assaulted in the male locker room. And it's like, well, that's not the case, because all you're doing, at least speaking from like the perspective of like my high school, for example, because I went to high school in a somewhat liberal, area. I'd moved away from my small conservative town by that point, by the grace of my mother, thankfully. Thank you, Mom. But in this area, when it got around that the staff was trying to put me in the female locker room, all that did was make the bullying so much worse. Of course, because, people that don't know me are like, you're putting these girls at risk. And, even for the people that know me, they are putting these girls at risk, because even if all of these girls knew me and knew I wasn't a danger, and I know I'm not a danger, it still opens the door, it cracks the door for others to then have access to that space. So it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. This is why we separated women's spaces from men's all those years ago. Because, if you make one exception, well, now the door is open.
And just the idea, as you said, of making someone uncomfortable. And that's one thing that I think we as girls and as women, we experience that from boys and men regularly, is, just acting silly, being stupid as a boy, but other things as, just to make you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's no real way to gauge who's getting into these spaces, because right now it's in many of these states, and I believe California is one of them. I know in Michigan is, where it's self-ID laws. So anyone, and I know that some activists will say, oh, that never happens, but it does, because I've seen these cases and it does happen. Of course it does.
Yeah.
Now the door is open. So really what is to stop somebody from just saying, oh, I'm a trans woman, and then having access to those spaces? I know some people roll their eyes at that and think that that's ridiculous, but unfortunately it is happening. And by denying that it's happening, you're not actually helping, that side of the movement. If we are to look at it from that perspective at all you're doing is opening the door to more harm for everybody.
Yeah. Well, we were going to give ourselves 20 minutes to debrief, and I think we've done that. I don't want people to, just totally give out. But we've had such a good crowd all night. And I wish more people would tell us, who they are and, say hello. And so we know. who's tuned in and so forth. But I guess this is it. Do
Yeah.
you agree, Johnny, or do you have something else you want to say?
I do agree. I feel like I've gotten all my thoughts out there. You know, if anyone has any comments, questions, you know, this will be posted on YouTube. I think we usually post it the next day. Am I correct there? Do we have a time?
It takes a few hours for it to process.
Yeah.
And then typically I move it from live to video.
Okay.
So I have to get there and do that too.
Whenever it's on YouTube, you got anyone that has any thoughts, you're more than welcome to comment. I usually read the comments. So if you have like any questions or anything, you know, we'll see it. I might respond if I have the time.
Well, yeah, I try to respond also to comments and questions, and I'm really grateful for my friend chiming in and for Willie and Warren stopping by. So I guess that's it. We'll talk again, and something may happen next week. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darla.